10 million years ago, the Earth was a very different place. The world stood in the late Miocene epoch, a time when the continents had drifted close to their modern positions, but the land was still wild, raw, and untamed. Towering mountain chains rose higher each century, and the climate was slowly shifting from warm and humid toward cooler and drier conditions. Vast forests that once blanketed the land were breaking apart into open woodlands, scattered thickets, and endless golden grasslands. In these wide and dangerous places, the distant ancestors of humans were beginning their long and uncertain journey of survival. They were not yet human, not even close to what we recognize as people today. They were early apes, creatures like Dryopithecus, Oranopithecus, and Civipithecus, small to medium-sized primates with long arms, grasping feet, and sharp minds just beginning to awaken. They lived mostly in the trees, where they built nests of branches to sleep safely away from predators. Their lives were short and harsh, but they carried the first faint sparks of what would someday grow into humanity. Each morning, these primates would rise with the sun. They would stretch their long limbs, shake off the cool night air, and climb down cautiously from their sleeping trees. The world around them was alive with sound, the calls of strange birds, the cries of distant mastodons, and the rustle of giant prehistoric horses moving through the tall grass. The ground was dangerous, filled with predators like saber-toothed cats, massive hyena-like carnivores, and giant reptiles lurking near waterholes. Yet the ground also offered food, and food was everything. Driven by hunger, they had to risk their lives every day to survive. They foraged for fruits fallen from trees, cracked nuts with their teeth, dug up roots and tubers with their fingers, and turned over stones to find insects hidden below. Sometimes, when they found the eggs of birds or reptiles, they ate them quickly before any predator caught their scent. They lived on whatever they could find, and they shared what they could carry. Their diet was not rich or luxurious, but it gave them enough energy to survive another day. Survival was not about comfort but about persistence. Water was just as important as food, and finding it could mean the difference between life and death. The group would travel carefully across open plains to reach hidden streams or muddy pools left behind by ancient rivers. They moved together, always scanning the grass for movement, always ready to run or climb. When large animals like mastodons or antelope-like herds were drinking, they stayed hidden until the giants moved on. Only then would they approach and cup water in their hands, drinking quickly before retreating back to safety. Predators were everywhere, and fear shaped their world. Their eyes were sharp, their ears alert, and their senses tuned for danger. If the wind shifted and carried the smell of a big cat, the group would freeze. If they heard the faint crunch of footsteps behind them, they would scatter into the trees. They had no claws, no fangs, and no armor. Their only defenses were their speed, their agility, and each other. They survived by watching out for one another. When one spotted danger, it screamed, and the whole group would flee in a flash of fur and motion. Alone, they were weak. Together they were stronger. At night, they returned to the trees. As the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with fire, they climbed high and built nests from leaves and branches. They huddled close to keep warm, grooming each other to remove parasites and strengthen their social bonds. Below, the dark world came alive with predators. Hyenas howled, snakes slid silently through the grass, and the cold wind whispered through the empty plains. The trees were their fortress. The darkness was their enemy. Sleep came lightly and in short bursts, broken by the need to wake and watch the shadows. Life was brutal, but it was also the beginning of something new. These early apes lived in small groups, and within those groups, the seeds of cooperation were forming. They cared for their young for years, teaching them where to find food and how to avoid danger. Mothers carried infants clinging to their fur. Youngsters played and learned through imitation. Older members defended the group from threats. These social bonds improved their chances of survival, and this cooperation was one of the most important steps on the path toward becoming human. Their brains were small, but they were growing. Curiosity sparked inside them. They watched how twigs could pull insects from holes. They learned which plants healed their stomachs and which ones made them sick. They remembered where fruit ripened in certain seasons. This memory, this awareness of the future slowly separated them from other animals. They did not plan cities or tools yet, but they were beginning to think beyond the present moment. That spark of thought would, millions of years later, become the intelligence of humankind. Seasons passed, droughts came and dried the rivers, Fires swept through grasslands and left behind blackened earth. Storms tore down trees. Through it all, they endured. When food was scarce, they traveled farther. When predators grew bolder, they moved in tighter groups. When the forest shrank and grassland spread, some of them climbed down from the trees more often, learning to walk on 2 feet for short distances. This was the first faint step toward bipedalism, the trait that would define humans millions of years later. They did not know it, but every small adaptation was shaping their destiny. 10 million years ago, they were not powerful. They were fragile, hunted, and few, yet they survived. They survived because they were clever enough to learn, brave enough to explore, and united enough to protect each other. Day by day, generation by generation, they carried life forward through one of the harshest eras on Earth. They asked for nothing from the world, but they gave everything just to live. In the blazing heat of the sun and the cold darkness of night, under the shadows of giant beasts and the threat of tooth and claw, they lived. They lived through hunger and fear, through drought and storm, through endless danger. They lived because something inside them refused to give up. And that small spark, that will to endure, is what would, millions of years later, light the fire of humanity. This is how life was sustained 10 million years ago. This is how the first fragile ancestors of humans survived, not through strength or weapons or cities, but through courage, memory, and the unbreakable instinct to keep going. Their struggle was the first chapter of the human story, written not with words or tools, but with survival. Every breath they took brought us closer to who we are today, and though they could not have known it, every sunrise they saw, every fruit they found, every danger they escaped, was a step on the long road to becoming human.